Okay, so here we go. Chapter 13, A Face in the Window. Within minutes, Jason had slammed the bulky Dictionary of Forgotten Languages on the kitchen table. Rick quietly cleared the dishes. Julia puzzled over the parchment. I thought he'd never leave, she commented. But you have to admit, that soup sure hit the spot, Rick countered. Jason didn't reply. He was lost in the book. Once again, he was in the same room with Rick and Julia, yet his mind was a million miles away. From inside the caretaker's quarters, Nestor looked across the dark yard to the lights of Argo Manor kitchen. He smiled. Argo Manor had come back to life. Just like the old times, he said softly. Living alone had given the habit of thinking out loud. In truth, Nestor hoped that with those kids there, things would be even better than they'd been in the old times. He thought back to the early afternoon and his visit from Oblivia Newton. His teeth clenched involuntarily. You'll never get this house, Oblivia, he whispered. He stood for a long time thinking about Oblivia's ruthless attempts to take Argo Manor. And yet, he could not help thinking about the twins and Rick inside the house. They seemed to be her opposite in every single way. They were open while Oblivia was closed. They had imagination and intelligence, while Oblivia knew only greed and money and lust for power. The three kids, Nestor decided, represented youth and hope. Oblivia could only bring ruin and despair. Oblivia Newton had tried to get her hands on Argo Manor in every legal way possible. She had offered huge amounts of money. Ask for anything you'd like, she had told the owner. I'll give it to you. Fine, Ulysses Moore had told her. I want you to go away. This only insulted Oblivia and unfortunately made her even more determined to get Argo Manor no matter what it took. The storm crashed down with increasing intensity. Argo Manor began to creak and groan as if the house itself was protesting. In the kitchen, Julia, Jason, and Rick huddled together, reading the translations of their latest parchment out loud. And while the first message had been mysterious, the second clue seemed downright ununderstandable. While of 4, 1 will open by lot. Of 4, 3 the motto will show. Of 4, 2 mean death on the spot. And 1 of 4 will lead below. Julia summed up their feelings in her own unique style. This stinks, she concluded. Rick kept trying to figure it out by applying practical logic. Okay, he began, we can't be sure that the first message is really the first message. What? Julia grunted. I mean, we were likely to find the second message more quickly and more easily than the one in the cliff, so it might be that the second message is really the first message. And even if our hunch is right, that we're on some sort of a crazy treasure hunt, we can't be sure we're actually beginning at the beginning. So let's go back to basics, he concluded. Here's what we do know. We have 4 keys in our hands. Julia chimed in, and on this parchment it says that 1 of 4 will open by lot. Blah, blah, blah. My guess is that one of the doors over there, and lot could mean more of them, like a whole lot. Rick shrugged, unconvinced. It might be one of the keys, he countered, since by lot means by chance or luck. Oh, like a lottery, Julie answered. Like destiny, Jason said. His voice seemed far away. It was the first time he'd said since Nestor left. A lot can mean our fate, he said. It might be our lot in life to open that door. Julia cast a worried look at her twin. Jason simply believed. He believed that it wasn't an accident that he'd been dangling from that cliff. It wasn't chance. It wasn't dumb luck either. This was destiny taking over. Jason felt it. He knew. As if some unseen hand were guiding him and leading him and the others to some unknown task. And sometimes his belief in things like destiny and fate completely freaked his sister out. Jason left the others in the kitchen. Everybody needed a break. He made his way toward the stone room without turning on the lights. He crossed through 2 sitting rooms, which, in the dark, seemed especially creepy. The furniture in the rooms looked like sleeping figures. The rain and the wind had grown in intensity, howling to the point that it seemed like the house was on the verge of being thrown down the cliff. The tower at the top of the stairs groaned from the wind. The night itself was wild, like a raging beast, clawing at whatever stood in its way. Jason had the 4 keys with him. He felt their weight in the pocket of his pants, and he fished them out and held them tightly as he stepped slowly and deliberately toward his destination. When he reached the stone room, it was very dark. Jason groped for the light switch. A flash of lightning suddenly cut through the darkness, and Jason saw something outside the window. It had a face, and its eyes were looking right at him. Chapter 14, Destiny. Rick and Julie rushed to the source of Jason's cry, and they found him in the darkness of the stone room, and he was pointing at the window. He's here. He's out there. Who? Who is here? Calm down, Jason, and turn on the light, she told Rick. Rick flicked it on. What did you see? Tell me exactly what you saw. He said, I saw the face of a man outside the window, and he was staring at me. One thing was clear to both Julie and Rick. Jason had no doubt about the truth of his story. Even if they found it hard to believe, Jason himself was absolutely positive. Are you sure it was a man? Yes, it was a man. Are all the doors locked? Julie asked. In a flash, Rick raced through the house, checking and turn checking and double checking each door and window. He turned on every light he could find. Everything's locked tight, he announced when he returned. Jason had calmed down now, and he was sitting quietly with his sister beside him. Do you think it was the ghost of Ulysses Moore? He said no, but that face had a scar that went all the way across it. Shh, Jason, Julia whispered. We're safe here. We're all together. The house is locked. Nestor isn't far away. Jason fidgeted with the 4 keys in his hands. Lizard, hedgehog, elephant, and owl. What about up there? He asked with a tremulous voice. He meant, of course, the room at the top of the stairs, the room with the diary, the fleet of ships. There was a violent boom, a flash of lightning, and the electricity went out altogether. Oh, I know that you guys are used to having the power go out. We just go get flashlights, right? Oh, great, Julia said. It will come back on in a second, Rick said. Don't be afraid. You hear that? Do you hear that? Do you hear what, Jason? Julia managed to answer, and she reached for Jason. Jason didn't answer because Julia heard it now. It was the wind, and it was the rain. It was the dark threat of the night, the terrible storm. It was the window up in the tower slamming against its frame, banging rhythmically, just like footsteps. For the first time in a long time, Julia wished her mother and father were home. Rick's face suddenly glowed in the darkness. It's my lighter, he explained. My father always said it's a good idea to keep one on you at all times. He slowly moved away from the twins. I'll close the window upstairs. No, Julia said. Why not? Stay here. Let's just all stay here until the lights come back on. What do you say? It's just a storm, Rick said. There's no point in sitting around whimpering in the dark. Shoot, are there any candles around here? Like a flashlight or anything? I remember seeing candles in one of the kitchen drawers, Julia answered. Okay, that's good, right? I'll go get them. But Julia decided that it would be best if they all went together, and so they did. And Rick led the way with his lighter, flickering for a few seconds at a time. Then it became too hot for him to hold, and it went out. Each flash gave them just enough light to see where they were going. They weaved through the rooms. When they reached the kitchen, the electricity came back on just as suddenly as it had gone out, and every corner of Argo Manor was lit once more, but the kids stuffed candles in their pockets just in case. Then they climbed the stairs to the tower together, and Rick closed the window again. As they headed downstairs, Rick noticed, Did you notice how many windows there are in the tower? No, Julia answered. 4, Rick said, one on each side. Jason answered, while of 4, one will open by lot. That could mean the windows, just like I read in my book. Somebody's trying to tell us something. No, I don't think so. The word 4 must refer to the 4 keys, while one is destiny, Julie finished his sentence. They returned to the stone room. Jason could not help but glance at the window and wondering if the face might appear again. But the presence of his sister and Rick calmed him down, and soon all 3 kids were studying the 4 locks. They were 4 circular holes, all identical and arranged just like this. There was no indication of which key should fit which lock. All this thinking is getting us nowhere, Julia complained. Let's just try them randomly. No, Rick said. There has to be a logical pattern here. We just haven't recognized it yet. Lizard, hedgehog, elephant, and owl. What do these animals all have in common? Not this again, groaned Julia. The message says, by lot. Jason remembered the others. I understand what the message says, Rick said. He was losing his patience. But we have to at least come up with a plan. Well, here's the plan, Julia replied. Let's start shoving keys in the locks and see if we get lucky. But what if we end up ruining some kind of mechanism, Rick protested. There might be only one chance of getting to the treasure. Julia and Jason thought about that. Well, Rick had a point, they said, so let's try with the elephant on the top. Okay, Julia said, why not the hedgehog? E is for elephant. It's the first letter in the alphabetical order. Then, where do we put the lizard? Rick asked. In the lock on the left or the one on the right? Jason didn't answer because he didn't have any idea. And what if we use the wrong names? This one seems more like a newt than a lizard. A newt? Scoffed Julia. A newt? A newt? Don't tell me you know the difference between a newt and a lizard. Rick narrowed his eyes, uncertain how to take Julia's comments. Look, he said. He ran his finger along the carved animal. It has a small tail and smooth skin, not scales. Wow, Julia said with what seemed like genuine respect. You really do know the difference between a newt and a lizard. I'm impressed. But what about the others? Do you know what kind of owl this is? Rick smiled and shrugged. Just an owl. Jason handed him another key. This is definitely a porcupine and not a hedgehog. Why? Porcupines are chubby, Jason said with earnestness, but hedgehogs are more like mice. Plus, they have pointy noses. This is definitely a porcupine. No one could argue with that, probably because everyone was tired of arguing. All that was left was the elephant. African or Asian, it didn't seem to make much difference. Plain old elephant seemed good enough. Julia attempted a new line of reasoning. If the owl eats the newt, owls don't eat newts, Rick stated, the elephant could stomp on all the others, and he'd have to be careful with the porcupine. You're just being ridiculous, Julia. Can't you be serious? Next, they considered the geographical regions in which each animal lived. The top block could be north and bottom south. West was left and east was right. Porcupines are primarily from the Americas, Rick reasoned. West, the lock on the left. But owls live all over the place, Julia pointed out. This isn't going to work. They tried sizes and then colors, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find a logical connection among the 4 keys. Finally, Julia lost her patience. She grabbed the owl key and slipped it into the uppermost lock on the door. Wait, cried Rick. Julia turned the key. Click! See, Julia said triumphantly. Easy as pie. How did you do that? I put it in and turned it. I guess that makes me a genius. Now hand me the other one. Which one comes next? Elephant, Julia decided, and she slowly slid it into the lock on the left and gave it a turn. Click. Porcupine, Julia ordered. Click. Newt. She took the last key from Jason and inserted it into the bottom lock of the diamond pattern. Once again, the key turned easily. Clack! Julia smiled, thoroughly pleased with herself. Done. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please send your card and prizes to Argo Manor, care of Julia Covenant. Not so fast, genius, Rick chided. He placed one hand on the door and pushed it. It didn't budge. Rick grabbed one of the keys and tugged on it a little. I'm just a simple guy, Julia. I've never lived in the big city or anything, but something tells me this door is still locked. Julia felt overcome by a huge wave of disappointment. She gave the owl key a second and then a third twist. Click, click. They're just turning without doing anything, she realized. She tried turning them each 4 times and then twice again. Angrily, the door remained closed. Rick looked at Julie seriously. See, there's got to be a rule for unlocking this door. There has to be a logical way of figuring it out. Jason turned to the door and raised his arm above his head. Open up, he shouted. Open up! He banged his fists against the wood. His thumps echoed back eerily. Jason turned to Rick and Julia, his eyes gleaming. Did you hear that? It's empty back there. Julia and Jason shifted the keys around in various patterns, turning them with no success. Rick picked up the translation of the parchment and began to study it line by line. Of 4-3, the motto will show. What motto? Of 4-2 means death on the spot. Which of these animals means death and which one leads below? While Rick racked his brain, Jason attempted to use a single key in each of the 4 locks. He would slide one in, turn it, and take it out and slide it into the next one. As for the order of the locks he chose, he turned clockwise, counterclockwise, first above and then below, then right and then left. But after countless attempts, the door still remained locked tight. Maybe it's a trick devised to drive us insane, Julia said. She was only half kidding. I'm not even sure this is a real door anymore. She slumped down beside Rick. Maybe we need some magic words like open sesame, bagels. Rick gave a half smile. But that got Jason thinking. Or maybe it's like the Lord of the Rings, he said. You know, that scene outside the mines. Say friend and enter. Jason snapped to attention. Wait a minute. What did you say? I said, say friends and enter. Those are the elven words that Gandalf reads before the Moria gate. No, not you, Jason, Rick said. Julia, you said, I said open sesame bagels. Open, 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 open. He reread the translation aloud. Could it be? Rick, Julia coaxed. Could it be what? Like you're not making any sense. Rick snatched at the keys. He bent down on his knees and lifted them up from the floor. It spells a word. N for newt, O for owl, P for porcupine, E for elephant. Nope, Julia said. Huh? Nope. Julia said, it spells nope. Rick grinned, thrilled to his bones. Not nope, he said, shifting the keys around. Open. Open. Jason nodded. Yes, that makes sense. Rick leaped to his feet and began feeding the keys into the locks, murmuring to himself. The riddle said, with 4 by lot, open. He placed the final key in the door, turned it, click went the lock, and the door swung slowly open.